What's going on, Washington Commanders Nation? It's your guy Rio from the Ramblin' with Rio Robinson YouTube channel. And per usual, this episode is brought to you by BetUS Sportsbook Casino and at Washington on the Daily on Instagram. Today, I'd like to welcome to the show my guy David Harrison, the second half of the Locked On Commanders podcast. We had the Rooster in last week. Post draft, I decided we're going to bring in the other half and get them on. What's going on, Dave?
What's going on, Rio? Appreciate you having me on. Sorry we couldn't make it work earlier, but, glad we finally got here.
No, it's all good, man. The draft is finally over, and it's about that time we're getting ready for football. Actual football being played. Rookie mini camps coming up over the weekend. What's the general takeaway and your takeaway of the Washington draft class?
Of the class, I think they filled a lot of needs. You know what I mean? I think that Martin and Ron came into this thing knowing that they wanted to do certain things for their roster and fill certain holes, but then also bring a certain level of dynamic ability to their roster, specifically their offense. I think that's what you see with Jahan Dotson. You see with Brian Robinson, too. Generally, kind of opposite end of spectrum type of players. You have one that's a little bit more electric, more dynamic, more kind of 3-level ability. But then you have Brian Robinson, who's more that thumper, kind of that power guy. But it kind of just shows the different personalities that the Washington offense really wants to be able to embody this year. And I think that's a direct reflection of what happened in 2021. We saw too many times this Washington offense got into slugfests, and let's be honest, they just didn't have anything outside of their offhand jab, and that was just the truth of the nature with the team. So this year, they come in looking to get a little tougher, looking to get kind of that right hook going, and I think they did a good job of addressing the types of players. And now, we get to see starting this weekend how it starts to kind of blend together.
Absolutely. And I see that a theme in the draft was they're drafting older players, experienced players, guys that are ready to come in, step in and play right away. Did it surprise you that they didn't put more of an emphasis on the linebacker position? Or maybe is it that the media and fans, they're not as desperate as we are when it comes to the position?
Yeah, I mean, I think Martin Mayhew put it perfectly. He was asked, similar type questions on reaching for players or the media saying that they reached or took guys way too early. And he said that, only those inside the building really know how they evaluate their roster, how they evaluate these players, and how they project them. I mean, look, if Brian Robinson is expected to come in here and take a third of the snaps, then you're going to have a very high projection on a guy like that in the NFL draft. Whereas, Daniel Jeremiah or David Harrison or the Rooster may look at Brian Robinson and say, you know what, I'd probably give him maybe 10% of the reps. And that's really just like must pass situations as a pass blocker only. Well, then I'm probably going to have like a 5th round grade on that guy. But so those are kind of the differences and nuances. I am surprised still that they didn't go after at least a linebacker, even in the mid to late rounds to kind of develop back there. But to a certain extent, that's a little bit smart from a PR standpoint, because if you bring in a 2nd round, a 3rd round, even honestly a 4th or a 5th round off-ball linebacker, and a guy like Jamin Davis comes into 2022 and starts struggling a little bit or is a little bit slow out the gate, you're going to hear immediate pressure from the fans, immediate pressure from the media to replace him with that rookie and see what the rookie can do. Well, this kid's situation, there's no draft pick. There's no draft pick out there to replace him with. So if hopefully it doesn't happen, but if Jamin Davis comes out the gates a little slow, we might complain about Jamin Davis coming out the gate slow, but we really don't have somebody to say, well, replace him with this name, because there's no name there to replace him with.
Exactly. And it seems like they had they targeted a very specific character traits in these players. Like Ron in his interview with Julie today, he brought up Brian Robinson's ball security like 3 times. He's had over about 600 touches in college and never put the ball on the ground. That's an important thing when you consider that our running back led the league in fumbles last year. And I think like a lot of I've been saying it on my show for weeks now. We need another running back, and people don't feel like we need another running back. I think Antonio Gibson may thrive best when he's not necessarily having to take the punishment and the expectations of getting the ball on every 1st and 2nd down. I think we need a tough hammer running back, and Brian Robinson adds more than that. He actually has escapability and some wiggle to him in the offseason. What do you think of the 3rd round pick?
Yeah, I mean, like you said, he's got some underrated, receiver abilities himself. I mean, he's not gonna be, the next James White to a Tom Brady or anything, but he could certainly be like a Leonard Fournette. I mean, I think Leonard Fournette has a very underrated receiving ability there in Tampa and gets a lot more pass receptions than people think. And I don't mean Robinson and Fournette are comparable physically, just in that kind of a role. But look, with AG, I mean, Chris talked about it on our Locked On Commanders episode that dropped on Wednesday, that some of his fumble issues are just the fact that, sometimes guys just kind of have that issue and they got to work that out and they got to work through that. But some of it's
Mhm.
also wear and tear. And it's just like pressures and quarterback hits are cumulative on a quarterback and they can kind of cause some mistakes. Hits and pressure are cumulative on a running back too. And when you have a guy like Antonio Gibson who looks around and Terry McLaurin's getting hung out to dry after, on a lot of targets, Logan Thomas is hurt. Curtis Samuel hasn't been seen. De'Ami Brown is kind of struggling to really become a dynamic player on the team. And DeAndre Carter hadn't really stepped up at the time, early to mid season. You kind of look at yourself in the mirror, you say, a lot of this is going to be on me now. And it kind of forces
Mhm.
you to do things that maybe you wouldn't do characteristically and kind of put the ball in jeopardy between the tackles where you normally wouldn't do or shouldn't do according to your coaching. So getting him a fewer reps is actually, I think, going to be a good thing for him. Bad for fantasy rosters, but I mean, nobody inside the Commanders organization cares about anybody's fantasy teams. And Brian Robinson can
Facts.
come in there, take some of those touches away. JD McKissick can still fill his role. And look, the day of the one back system, I think it's gone. I think as much as the running back position has kind of been minimized in the media for NFL teams, I think it's actually accentuated in NFL teams by the amount of running backs that they want and the diversity they want because of the versatility it brings to their scheme. Derrick Henry is kind of a unicorn right now in the NFL, but most
Definitely.
teams you want that multi-back system. And again, going back to last year with the absence of Peyton Barber, this team just did not have that thump up the middle.
Oh yeah, for sure. And I don't believe in paying running backs, and Gibson has 2 years left on his contract. That's always something to think about when it comes to taking a running back, whether you felt it was too early or not. Another running back to get in this mix had to be added. And Jared Patterson, I'm pretty sure he'll have his say in the running back competition, but I think they drafted this guy in the 3rd round with a very specific vision for what he was going to add. Another guy they clearly have more of a vision than us fans think. The next pick, Percy Butler in the
Yeah.
4th round. I couldn't even pretend like I knew who the player was when we picked him.
Mhm.
So I was assuming, okay, they needed to replace the DeShazer Everett role, which is emergency safety, special teams ace guy. And then Ron comes out in his interview today and says, no, he's going to be our 3rd safety and play 50% at minimum of the snaps this year. What did you feel about that pick?
I love it. I'm like you though. I can't sit here and pretend that, oh yeah, Percy Butler did all kinds of homework on him, knew exactly who he was. No,
Right.
when his name came across the board and everybody in the media room was like Percy Butler at Louisiana, I'm not gonna name everybody, but I will tell you more than a few people in the room went, who?
Right
But
there
look,
with you.
and I think that's just, look, we talked about Kyle Hamilton, we talked about Lewis Seen, we talked about Jaquan Brisker, Jalen Petrie, we talked about all these day one, day two
Mhm.
safety type of players, Dax Hill. We all put a higher emphasis on safety than obviously the Washington Commanders did, and that's part of this phenomenon. But the more you look into Percy Butler, the more you have to like not just his athleticism, not just his special teams ability, but in the way that he attacks the ball, the way that he plays the game with confidence, and that's what you really need out of a young guy here. Is you need that confidence because if that confidence can stay hold as he's getting taught by his coaches, as he's getting taught by his other teammates, and learning on the fly and learning as he goes, that confidence stays, and that confidence is going to help him kind of blend that knowledge into ability. And yeah, I think in the first year, I mean, what Coach Rivera said sounds like a perfect plan for him. Get him on the field quite often, but don't necessarily make him kind of the starter day in and day out. But I think by this time next year, you'd be talking about Percy Butler being your starting free safety role. I mean, the safety positions are kind of fluid nowadays. But if his athleticism turns into performance, I'll tell you right now, him and Cam Curl can do some damage in the NFC East.
For sure. I look at that relative athletic score. I look at a 4.340 in his athletic
Yeah.
profile. I heard his interview on B Mitch and Finley. The guy is sharp, man. The guy, he just wants to put on for his city and put on for his family. And I'm excited to see what he has because I didn't know anything about the prospect.
Yeah.
So I couldn't even pretend. A player I didn't know, but what most people would call the biggest head scratcher of the class is the 2nd round pick for Darian Mathis, Big Phil out of Alabama. We had another one of those Bama wall guys here, and that brings into question Daron Payne's immediate future and future past Washington. Is he the Daron Payne replacement? Do they plan on keeping Payne on the roster through the season? I feel like you have to at this point, right?
I think you have to keep Daron Payne. Yeah, just looking at the depth chart and everything, losing Ioannidis, losing Tim Settle, I think you really kind of have to keep Daron Payne on the roster. But I think what Fedarian Mathis is a warning. He's a warning to Daron Payne that your spot is not solidified. Your spot is up for grabs. And as early as 2023, you may be no longer a part of this program, depending on what this rookie does behind you. And look, he knows him well. So as far as that, competitive nature, he knows Fedarian. Fedarian called him his big bro. He said Jonathan Allen was another big bro, but Fedarian and Daron were teammates, so they know each other. They know what each other's going to bring to the table, and Mathis is going to have some great mentors there, and be able to learn maybe a little bit from some of the quote unquote struggles that Daron has had, but also look at some of the greatness that Jonathan Allen has been able to put up. Fedarian is actually a player I am well versed in, and actually did study a little bit, but because I expected the Buccaneers to maybe target him to be kind of an Ndamukong Suh type of replacement there next to Vita Vea. So I was a little bit surprised. I thought that Washington would be looking more for kind of a Devontae Wyatt or a Perrion Winfrey type of defensive lineman versus a kind of a big space eater like Fedarian. But honestly, if you're trying to get a better push and a better pass rush out of your front four, getting a guy who just by his sheer size is going to require at least two blockers on a lot of downs kind of helps that. And if Fedarian can turn that size into ability as well and really force teams to invest in the center part of that offensive line and keeping running backs in, then maybe Chase Young and Montez Sweat can take advantage of that collapse in the middle.
Yep, and the fifth round pick is going to be it's crazy. When your fifth round pick is the most exciting and like sexiest pick to talk about, that makes things very interesting. There's no quarterback controversy here, right? Like they're going to let him cook and develop at his own pace.
Yeah.
Or is he going to be competing with Heineke to be the quarterback two at some point this season? Like, how do you feel the Sam Howell pick? What was the media room response to it, and how do you feel this is going to play out?
It had to be Sam. I mean, coming into the beginning of the fifth round, everybody to a person in that room said this has to be Sam. Like, I get it. Carson Wentz has a history with when teams draft a quarterback behind him and all this other stuff, but you can't go past the fifth round and have a pick and not take Sam Howell if you're the Washington Commanders. So no surprise there. Obviously everybody was surprised that he got there in the first place. I'll put it to you this way: as far as quarterback competition, there's going to be no competition. Ron has already said that Carson Wentz is QB1. He's already told Carson he's QB1, and that's going to be the fact all the way through the season. Preseason, doesn't matter. Sam Howell can go out there for a quarter a game, throw 300 yards, 3 touchdowns. Carson Wentz is going to be your starter week 1. And I think on the depth chart, Taylor Heineke is going to be QB2. Sam Howell is going to be QB3. They're going to put him down there as much as possible, kind of squash the buzz as much as possible, as quickly as possible. But I'll tell you right now, if this Carson Wentz thing starts to turn ugly quick and you go through 4 or 5 games and it's not looking like a fit and things aren't clicking and some of these problems are coming in, the pressure is going to mount. Whether he's QB3 on the depth chart or not, the pressure is going to start to mount. And it's not going to be for QB2 Taylor Heineke to become a starter again. It's going to be for QB3 Sam Howell to leapfrog Taylor Heineke, become the starter over him. Because, again, Taylor Heineke, good kid, good story, the kind of person that you really want to be successful. We've seen what he has to offer. We kind of know what he has to offer. The team obviously knows that that's not what they want to roll into the future with. If Carson Wentz just is not working, I don't mean struggling here and there, and maybe you're 2-2. I'm talking 0-4, and you're losing by 2 scores and just more interceptions and touchdowns, etc. You're going to see Sam Howell pressure get ratcheted up. And honestly, the Commanders got to make a decision, some way, shape, or form, before you get to around week 10 or 11, because that 70% snap rate kicks in, and you lose a second-round pick next year to the Indianapolis Colts. If you're going to lose a second-rounder next year for Carson Wentz, it needs to be because he's going to be your starter next year. So they kind of need to figure this thing out, I would say, before Thanksgiving.
Hopefully, and please, God, don't put us in another one of these situations. I've been through so many quarterback controversies here. I want no part of it. Carson, please take this job. Run with it. Yeah. You are wanted here. They want you to be the guy. That's why, best case scenario, we don't even see Sam Howell play in the next 2 years. We don't see Sam Howell play until post like 2024 or something like that, if best case scenario. But things don't always go that way in the NFL, and shit could always go awry. The 5th round pick, tight end Cole Turner, I see a natural pass catching vertical threat, and that we do not have in the room right now. I see a role for him to get on the field and catch passes, especially in red zone situations. What do you got? What do you see in Cole Turner out of Nevada?
Yeah, I agree with you 100%. I think John Bates last year added a good blocking tight end who actually, to his own credit, I think he did better as a receiver than most people thought he was going to through the season. And I know I'm the only one, I would say, probably the most impressive rookie from last year's draft class. And that's not necessarily just because of how little some of them did, but that's a testament to what he was able to do. So you bring in Cole Turner, who's more pass receiver than blocker. Like you said, you already have Logan Thomas. So, I mean, if you can get some of that surprise pass blocking and run blocking ability out of Cole Turner that you did from John Bates in the receiving game, then you've got two really well-rounded tight ends. I kind of look at both of them and think that their ceilings could be kind of like a Cam Brate. Again, dipping back to the Buccaneers well, but not because it's Buccaneers, because Cam Brate has been doing this for a minute, been a part of a Super Bowl roster, not a superstar, not going to be a third-round pick in your fantasy pool or anything like that, but a very steady, very comfortable contributor to your offense that can be a glue guy.
Puts points on the board, so I will gladly take that here in Washington. And to close out the draft talk, Jahan Dotson, first-round pick. I think a lot of us, like me, my reaction included, like, I got fixated on the Chris Olave, Garrett Wilson, Jameson Williams of the world. A lot of people wanted Kyle Hamilton, but also a lot of people wanted the team to trade back. I wanted us to just stick there at 11 and pick, but it turns out that trade back got us a lot more than we would have got if we would have stayed at 11. Right. And my initial reaction compared to my analysis now of what the class is totally different. What are fair expectations for Jahan Dotson? Number one, the first commander of the Commanders era. What are fair expectations for his rookie campaign?
To take pressure away from Terry McLaurin. Like that's his job, honestly. And stats are secondary. If he comes in and has 800 yards receiving, 6 touchdowns, and makes some plays, then that's going to be a great rookie season. If he comes in, honestly, has 500 yards receiving and 2 touchdowns, but defenses are forced to roll away from Terry McLaurin more than they usually do, and it opens things up for him, opens things up for Logan Thomas, J.D. McKissick as well in the passing game. Jahan Dotson's the intention of Jahan Dotson coming to this team is not for Jahan himself to be a production factor. I mean, obviously, you would love to have the production, and Washington will gladly take it. But on the very first level of this pick, it's to force defenses to be more honest, commit their assets throughout the field, cover sideline to sideline, hash mark to hash mark, all the cliches and all that stuff. And then again, you look at the Carson Wentz trade. Why did they bring him in? Because he can put the ball everywhere on a football field. Doesn't always put it where you want him to. Doesn't always put it in the safest place. But the bottom line is when defenses line up against this offense now, especially if it's at its healthiest and you get Curtis Samuel back, they're going to know that ball could go 70 yards down the field. It could go 7 yards down the field. It could go to the left, the right, the middle. It can go backwards into some sort of wonky screen pass. The defense is going to have to cover all the green, which is something that we didn't see in 2021.
Yep, and if he does give us 500 yards and takes that attention off Terry, that would be 200 more yards than our number 2 receiver had last year. When your number 2 receiver on your roster is your running back with 387 yards, it is a need. That's why it was complete blasphemy that fans actually thought that the wide receiver room was good as it's set, banking on the question marks of Curtis Samuel's health and De'Ami Brown in year 2. But where Curtis Samuel, I've heard good things. I've just seen a report yesterday or an article about how his health is. Are we expecting to get Curtis Samuel in full form by training camp this year?
Yeah, I mean, based off of the health status that he had the last time he was in the facility, absolutely, unless there's some sort of setback that we just haven't been made aware of, you expect Curtis Samuel to be healthy, and that's really what you need for this team. And honestly, if Curtis Samuel is healthy in 2021, then things could go a little bit different. I wouldn't say 100% different, but I think Curtis Samuel coming back to that offense. You look at some of those closer games, especially against some of these competitors. I still kind of stand on the claim that they should have beat the Broncos, could have beat the Packers, could have beat the Chiefs, and those are 3 games that if you come away with even 1 or 2 of them, the Saints game, especially the Saints game. By the way, that's the first game that Jameis Winston had that kind of a first half and actually won in his NFL career. So that just kind of tells you the anomaly that happened there. So this team was not far off, and I think that's really kind of the key there. The biggest glaring impact on why this team went the route that it did was inconsistency at the quarterback position and inconsistency at the weapons that Taylor Heineke had to throw to as well. And a lot of that had to do with health, which you hate to hold against a guy. But again, if you're Curtis Samuel, if you're the Washington Commanders, especially with that Carolina Panthers tie to Ron Rivera, this is the season. You got to see the production. You got to get on the field. Availability is the best ability, and you've got to demonstrate it, or else it's going to be essentially, quote unquote, wasted money. And the team is going to have to move forward in 2023.
Absolutely. And he gives our offense an element of excitement and versatility. Position flex is a word that's a drinking game word here. You take a shot every time you hear position flex and Buffalo nickel. like he adds an element. He adds that Debo Samuel element of he can come in the
A little
backfield. He
bit.
can come on a jet sweep, screen pass. Just I envision this Terry McLaurin, Dotson, Samuel wide receiver crew,
Yeah.
Gibson out the backfield, a healthy offensive line. There is no excuse with a quarterback 6'5", 237 with a rocket that can move. There is no excuse for Scott Turner in the offense, who just got an extension, by the way,
Yeah.
to give us more than 19 points a game this year. That's why offense. The theme of the draft was to upgrade the offense. And you just mentioned something a second ago, ties to Carolina. The Washington Commanders, as people like to call them on
Yeah.
Twitter. They brought in Trey Turner, a guy who saw his best years in this league, 28-year-old, five-time Pro Bowl guard,
Yeah.
who's coming off a bad season. That's why he was available this late in the offseason. What expectations do you have, and is it fair to expect him to start opposite Andrew Norwell at the guard spot or compete for it with Schweitzer?
Definitely compete. You definitely want to see him come in and compete, and you definitely want to see him come in and make a good run at it. And at the end of the day, the front five, as long as the front five that you have has been tested and each of them has earned their spot to a certain extent, then you're going to be happy. You know what I mean? And again, you're talking about giving the quarterback the best situation possible. But this is what happened. I know fans they always hate it. Sometimes it works out, sometimes it doesn't. I remember, Lovie Smith, he liked to bring Chicago Bears players with him. Ron Rivera's going to bring Panthers with him to Washington. Bruce Arians brought a lot of Cardinals with him to Tampa. I mean, that's just kind of the nature of the
They
beast.
do that.
Yeah,
Exactly.
and some of it's comfortability with just the person, but also with the scheme. I mean, this game is a very cerebral game, and some schemes are a little bit more cerebral than others. But really, when you look at Scott Turner is an offense coordinator that is from a reputation standpoint anyway. Doesn't give a lot of room for a free agent moving for scripting, right? For going off of the script. Ryan Fitzpatrick was asked about it, when he was supposed to be the starter last year during the preseason, about how much influence he kind of had over the offense and how much was just Scott Turner telling you what to do. You go out there and execute it. And he answered it in a very good way, but basically the answer was Scott tells me what to do and I go out there and I execute it. And that's the way Scott likes to run his system, and that's his job. That's his prerogative. So when a guy like Taylor Heineke or Trey or somebody else is going to come in and do the things you want them to do and ask them to do, and that's your kind of method of coaching, then that's very attractive to you. So it makes a lot of sense why those guys do that kind of thing.
Yep, today they signed Alex Erickson.
Yeah.
For those of you who think, oh my God, another Carolina. Ron never coached this guy in Carolina. He was
Right.
a Cincinnati Bengal, returning punts and kicks and getting in a little bit of wide receiver time. I see this as a potential DeAndre Carter replacement for us at a very cheap cost. Is that correct to assume?
Yeah, absolutely. You hit it right on that. I said the same. I just recorded Locked On Commanders that'll drop on Thursday. Earlier, I said the exact same thing. He's your DeAndre Carter, not the exact same type of player, and feel like you're not going to look at him and say that's DeAndre Carter's clone, but that's the situation. You're looking at a wide receiver who's been in the league for a little bit, has done some things in offense, but really he's a return guy, and he's got some dynamics, some explosiveness to him if possible, or if it gets opened up and he finds the right lanes. And that's exactly what he's doing. He's a guy who's going to come make the team on special teams, if at all, and then hopefully be able to work his way into the offense as the season develops.
Oh yeah, and him and Dax Milne, they're probably gonna have a go at it, have a competition to see who's gonna fill that DeAndre Carter role, because that is a role that's important.
Yeah.
He got on the field as a receiver and caught a few touchdowns, but what he did for us as a returner, it really helped our offense going forward because the defense wasn't causing too many turnovers. So we needed something to flip field position for us. In our return game, he was one of the best in the league at it last year. But we got rookie minicamp coming up this weekend. We got camp coming up in a couple months. The offseason is almost complete. How good can this Washington Commanders team be this year, coming off of not having a first place schedule this year? We actually have the 32nd strength of schedule, but that's a piece of paper at the end of the day. And the parity in this league, you know how that goes. How good can they be this year?
Yeah, I mean that's something to remember with this week's strength of schedule is that the worst team in the NFL can compete with the best team in the NFL any given Sunday, and that's this is the only sports league in America that can say that, and that's why it's the best in the league. That's why we cover this thing 10 and a half months out of the year. It's a little insane how much football we really get all year round. Look, this team can be a playoff team. This team can challenge for the NFC East division title. I said as much last year, and when you look at the roster from last year, you look at the roster this year. They're only better. Carson Wentz is an upgrade, not only over Taylor Heineke, but also over Ryan Fitzpatrick. So from a physical standpoint, athletic standpoint, your roster has gotten better. Now, in theory, they're getting healthy again. The coaching staff has had their hands on some of these guys, and some of these guys are learning some lessons. You see Chase Young taking a little bit more of a leadership role, kind of taking that more initiative role on making sure that he's ready for the season a little bit more than maybe he was in the past. And coaches are not being shy. They're not blasting him and disrespecting him to the media, but they're not being shy about acknowledging that, look, he's supposed to be one of our key players. He really wasn't delivering, and this is kind of his rubber year. You know what I mean? He's either going to go the route of a Nick Bosa, Joey Bosa, or he's going to go the route of a Cleveland Farrell. And he obviously does not want to go the Farrell route, and he's got the talent to avoid that path. He's just got to come in there and put it all together, put all the tools together, let the game come to him, and essentially stop trying to force it so much. And I think he knows that, and I think that's what we're going to see is a little bit more resolve from him. And if that front four can start firing off a little bit better, then it only impacts things moving backwards. And then to your point, I mean, this offense is built to average 22.8, 23.6 points per game, I would say on average, which maybe doesn't sound like such a huge increase, but that really is a very substantial increase in the National Football League with a defense that should be able to keep opponents to 24 points or less. That means you should be in all of the games, and you should be able to go in there against the Dallas Cowboys and really kind of provide them more competition maybe they did last year.
Absolutely. And Dallas got worse this offseason. The NFC East should be up for grabs. Year 3 of Ron. You got a quarterback that you believe in. The defense needs to live up to their expectations. The floor should be no lower than 9 games. Like 10 games should be the floor of this team. And for the first time in my fan life as a 30-year-old man, I want to see an 11-win season because I haven't seen it once yet. But I appreciate you for coming on with me today, Dave. Let folks know where they can find you and follow you on social media and where to find your podcast.
Yes, sir. 5 days a week. Find me over the Locked On Commanders podcast with Chris Russell. Well, 5 days a week, one of us is there. We're not always together, but one of us will be there dropping an episode for you on Twitter at DHarrison82, and then Sports Illustrated. I'm covering Washington Commanders for Fan Nation there, and yeah, I'll be in the facility for rookie camp and be keeping everybody as up to date as I possibly can with what's going on with the team.
Man, we want all the posts. We want all the updates, especially with the quarterback, the tight end, and the receiver, man. I'm very excited to be seeing reports live this weekend. Shit, I want to know what the practice jerseys look like because I heard there's supposed to be new practice uniforms this year as well. It's the first year of the Commanders. Thank you again for coming on with me, Dave.
Yes, sir. Appreciate you.
Yep. Have a good one, boss. Deuces.